In the midst of light rail, 3 nationally recognized business parks, and a dynamic blend of urban and residential areas, remains sites of the village from its early beginnings. No matter where the road may lead, there are a few barns that still speckle the village landscape. From a favorite red barn along the Highline Canal to a log cabin barn that remains a neighborhood treasure, the barn doors are open to recount many tales of a Greenwood Village story. The Calkins family homestead, located along Bellevue Avenue, has been home to their family's barn since the late 1930s. Notably used to house livestock, the Calkins barn served a greater purpose.
This barn has been here since about 1938. And since the barn, prior to my family, was a facility for building steam shovels. And that's why we have the great big huge doors, tall doors. Well, when we moved here, we had the intent of having a family farm. And so we needed somewhere to house animals, and in particular horses, because we ended up having lots of horses here. But we also had chickens in there and ducks, and my father decided to put 1,100 chickens in here in cages. And of course then we had to pick the eggs and all the things that went along with it. This whole corner was piled with hay all the way up to the top. And then this was an aisle that went down to the end, and there were pens for sheep or cows or whatever needed to be penned in. This entire area was stalls, built stalls for all the horses. When my father was elected mayor, the barn was sitting empty, and he decided that that would be a good place for the city of Greenwood Village to house their park and rec and their road maintenance. It was an interesting adventure because in the middle of the night, all of a sudden our entire property and barn would come alive with all the trucks, and they were going out with snow plows, and that was in the 70s.
The Calkins barn was the hub of summertime activity and a warm oasis of winter quiet. Although it is celebrating its 77th year, the structure still evokes memories and takes on a persona all on its own.
It was pretty empty for a while, and then the family decided to make a place to have parties. Up until year before last, we had parties, but then it started to get too cold, and so it's been something in my life for forever.
Today, the Calkins homestead looks quite different from their father's life as a farmer. Although the family homestead bears a new life, the barn remains to keep the family's traditions and history intact for family heirs.
We still have family living on the property, and the reason that we decided to keep the barn is because it's important to all the kids in the family. This generation that's coming up is playing in the barn just as I did.
Just down the road from the Calkins barn sits a log cabin that has a life that once filled its rustic confines. And it all started with some chickens.
My father had grown up in rural Oregon, and for him, knowing how to use tools and knowing how to be outside in the dark and knowing how to carry buckets of water and pitch hay was all part of the experience that he wanted for his sons growing up. So when the Second War was over, my father came back from Europe, and we looked around for a place outside of Denver where he could raise the boys. We were 3 of us, and I was the youngest, and raise us outside somehow. where we could get our hands dirty and get to know livestock and things like that. So we found this 3.5 acres, 4 acres outside of what was then rural Arapahoe County. We found a little spot there, and they built a house, and then a year or two before, my older brother said, I need a horse. And then we needed a calf, and we needed some pigs, and we needed some chickens, and well, they wouldn't fit into a little shed. And my big Christmas present one year was chickens on the living room floor. So we came into the living room singing Christmas carols, and there was a chicken on the floor. And I went into the chicken business, and we had to have a place to put them. So my dad said, well, we'll build a barn.
Barns of all sizes, shapes, and colors were very common during Craig's rural life growing up as a young boy. But it wasn't common to see a log cabin barn in his neighborhood, especially one that was made from scratch, one log at a time.
We went up to Squaw Mountain up above Echo Lake, above Denver, and you had to find a road that was all downhill once you cut the logs. So our early mornings and Saturday mornings, we would get up and drag a trailer up the mountain and saw down these big spars, these big dead pine spars. Took 2 or 3 years, I think, to build the barn. We had to, put it up log by log and shear off all the flat sides. And it was a great common family project to build this barn. We went into the barn building business, and my 2 older brothers were much more useful than I was, but I did my best to hold the tape and measure the distances. And pretty soon we had lambs. I had lambs and chickens and a pig. And by August for county fair time, I picked out a rooster, and the darn rooster turned out to be the grand champion rooster of the Arapahoe County Fair. Probably the best thing I ever did in my life. Highest achievement of my life was a grand champion rooster, 1948 county fair. So the barn was put to good use.
It is nearly impossible to find a good answer to the question, what is better, living in the city or living in the country? Craig's father's pleasure was living and raising his boys in a calm and peaceful environment of the countryside, where his boys were on their way to becoming men.
I think my father had in mind was that if a kid grew up in the city, he'd learn to take out the garbage. If a kid grew up in the country, he could learn to pitch hay and stack hay and dig ditch and haul logs. And there was something about that was more challenging and more satisfying.
Today, Craig and his family do not share a Greenwood Village address, but their log cabin still stands and serves as a frequent reminder to the village community of its birth and how 3 boys and their father were making those Lincoln log sets come to life.
It's hard to hold on to a rural past when the world is urbanizing at the speed it is, and it may lack attraction for modern day kids. When we worked out there, we were a team, and when kids came to work with us, they were part of the team. And the conversation was about how to get that log to fit just right. It was a part of our identity. We could say we knew how to build a barn. And I do think that it's good for Greenwood Village to be able to remember that it has those roots, and that they're worth remembering.
Former village resident Jerry Volovka has his own story about a red barn that has captured the likings of many recreational enthusiasts every day along the Highline Canal Trail. This 120-year-old barn evokes the perfect setting to enhance the rural experience in a growing suburban area.
When I knew it, it wasn't red, it was just weathered. It happened to be on the property on Willamette and University when we bought the property. And it sat next to a little old house that we fixed up and lived in while we were putting our house together that we moved in. It ended up that it was more of an eyesore and in the way. It wasn't unique to my parents because they seen a lot of that. My dad didn't need it, and so we sold it for $100 to a Mr. Lochran that owned this property at the time. The new owner had horses and had several boys, and they rode horses, and they wanted a place to keep them. Instead of building a barn, they bought that one.
Moving from the city to the country was not something Jerry was fond of at first. The city slicker boy had to adjust and learn quickly how to become a country boy.
I didn't move here because I wanted to be here, but my folks did. It was fun exploring like the Highline Canal and fields and stuff. I had a horse, so we rode a lot.
Although Jerry is no longer a resident of the village, he says when he comes back to visit, he appreciates how something as old as the Red Barn still brings value to the community.
I think it's great that the barn is still here and that people enjoy it. I think more old buildings should be kept. I think somebody will enjoy it for their horses. It's a good neighborhood for it.
There's just something intriguing about barns. Old ones for sure that present memories and built-in comfort. Perhaps it reminds us of all those times we played as kids and learned what the true purpose of a country barn really served. One thing is for sure, you can still see a barn or two in Greenwood Village that will hold history for many generations to come.